Please note this video contains discussion around death and grief with verbal references to suicide. Watch at your own discretion. It also contains spoilers for Haunted Mansion 2023, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, the Song of Ice and Fire book series, and its TV adaptation Game of Thrones. Hey, HannahMouse1 here. Now that we're firmly in the throes of spooky season, I'm going to discuss the different ways in which stories bring back dead characters and how to do so effectively. The inspiration behind this video came when I was watching Disney's 2023 release of Haunted Mansion. For what it's worth, I enjoyed this film. It was pretty lighthearted and let's be real, Owen Wilson could make a travel brochure into a top tier comedy, so I definitely got a laugh out of it. However, I went into this film not realising that it was a sequel to one of Disney's old films, much less having seen the original, and that resulted in there being a few things that felt a bit off, especially with the characters of the ghosts, presumably because they harken back to characters from the first film or even the Disneyland attraction that the film was based off in ways that I didn't understand. Yes, much like Pirates of the Caribbean, which actually came out the same year as the original Haunted Mansion, the ride Haunted Mansion came before the film did. The biggest of these things that didn't quite click for me was the character of William Gracie. Like, he felt really shoehorned into me, which is crazy considering the entire thing was his fault. It was his obsession to talking to Eleanor that allowed the mansion to become haunted and for Crump to escape, but he didn't really seem like either protagonist or antagonist. He was just kind of there. He certainly wasn't the main villain. That award goes to Crump, or the Hatbox Ghost, and he even helps Ben and Gabby find Travis before he's lured to the other side in a scene extremely reminiscent of the scene where Kit hears Mads Mardigan calling her in that Willow Disney Plus show, coincidentally another decade after the factory visit to an older franchise. But I also wouldn't call Gracie a good guy. Like I said, the whole thing is kind of his fault. Ben has to kind of pester him into helping, and in a lot of ways, stopping the Hatbox Ghost is pretty self-serving, as this is literally what will allow him to travel to wherever it is that the dead go and thus be reunited with Eleanor. I think what kind of confused me was the extent to which he was aware of what was happening. Like, he seemed aware enough of who the Hatbox Ghost was, and that if said ghost wasn't stopped, they'd be trapped in the house forever, which implies that he understands the separation between where he is and where the dead are supposed to be, but at the same time he's still desperately searching for Eleanor, as though he thinks that there's still a chance that she's somewhere in the house despite decades of fruitless searching and his knowledge that she's moved on. I actually consolidated this in my mind by relating it to the ghosts in Harry Potter, which work in a very similar way. In both cases there's a living plane of existence and a dead plane of existence which overlap, and while the dead should exist on one side of the line, their spectral form can be called back. In the Haunted Mansion this occurs because Madame Leota blurred the lines in a way by performing too many seances, and in Harry Potter it's more of a choice, but in both cases the ghosts which fail to move on seem to be the ones with some sort of a resolution, especially in Harry Potter, and they'll never be able to get over it either. For instance, Moaning Myrtle will never come to terms with Olive Hornby teasing her about her glasses despite not having seen Olive in half a century, and Olive being eligible for pensioners' benefits by the time Harry's stint at Hogwarts rolls around. She's still able to react to current situations and to help Harry find the chamber and to sexually harass Harry while he's in the bath, but she's doomed to be forever crying in the bathroom about how mean little Olive Hornby could be. As I understand it, the Haunted Mansion ghosts work fairly similarly. Gracie can react to events in the moment, like Ben needing help or the Hatbox Ghost arriving, but preoccupation will always be to look for Eleanor despite overwhelming evidence that she isn't in the mansion. I think that a resolution is really key in writing ghosts, because if anyone can come back or willy-nilly, it takes away the consequence of death. Coming back has to be unnatural or else it seems like a cop-out, and I imagine it also helps to provide consolidation for those who have lost loved ones, that them having moved on is a good thing, that they are at peace. But this got me thinking about other forms of reversing death. The trick is always going to be making it not feel like plot armor or a cop-out. I think the most important thing is having a clear set of rules and circumstances that you always adhere to when it comes to who and why and when people come back in your world. Then you need to consider the effects, purposes and ramifications that this instills upon the resurrected individual. I'd categorize these into three methodologies as either 1, needing to give the resurrected character some sort of significant drawback or punishment for defying nature, 2, having the characters suffer a significant paradigm or personality shift, or 3, having their return be set up really well beforehand in a way that prevents it from seeming like a Deus Ex Machina and that makes it clear that this is a unique situation that can't bring back anyone and everyone and by proxy eliminate any stakes that your story may have. While we're discussing Harry Potter, let's go through the ways that death is reversed or circumvented in that. It's really interesting really, because one rule in the wizarding world that is repeatedly mentioned in the books is that no magic can bring back the dead, and yet dead characters are able to return in one form or another throughout the series. If we're talking resurrection, we should probably start with the item with resurrection in the name, the resurrection stone. This is definitely a category 1 punishment for defying nature situation, especially when used like Cadmus Peveril, the stone's creator. In this case, it's clear that the dead belong with the dead and will appear distant and cold if forced to remain in the living, to the point where Cadmus killed himself in order to be with her properly. In fact, it's suggested that leading the user to death is the exact purpose of the stone, because the only other person who uses the stone is Harry, and he does it to more comfortably sacrifice sacrifice himself. These resurrected people can guide others back to the other side, but cannot peacefully exist on this side of the veil. This is similar to other times that Harry sees his parents throughout the series, such as in the Mirror of Erised, when he sees generations of his family that he should have no way of knowing what they look like. The mirror shows him the other side of the veil. The mirror also has the drawback of being extremely dangerous. There's no way of crossing over, but as Dumbledore warns Harry, men have wasted away before it. And this is significant as we can be fairly sure that Dumbledore also sees his lost family in the mirror. You can also tether yourself to one side of the veil with Horcruxes. These will stop you from passing on, by proxy keeping you alive. However, this has the drawback of damaging your soul and trapping you in limbo, which we see with Voldemort in the Deathly Hallows should these Horcruxes be destroyed. That's the weird baby thing in King's Cross, a soul so mangled that it can never reach peace, as confirmed by Harry in the final battle. I've seen what you'll be otherwise. One question that Harry Potter raises concerns portraits. Portraits are a weird one because yes, they are alive in a sense, they can move and think and get drunk. The spell Obscuro is able to identify them as being alive to the extent where it knows where to blindfold, and they seem to have memories from the person that they depict. Both Harry and Snape glean information and advice from Dumbledore's portrait as though it's the real guy, but is it? Was all that Voldemort needed to achieve immortality to commission a decent artist and to put a permanent sticking charm on the back of the canvas? Well, no, the portraits are representations of the person that they depict, and therefore won't stop a person proper from dying and experiencing death, which is what Voldy was specifically afraid of. Harry Potter also covers reanimation in the form of Inferi. These are basically the Wizarding World zombie stand-in, and the drawbacks of this is, well, it seems pretty obvious. They're zombies, mindless monsters in the bodies of the dead. It's less reversing death and more using the resources, aka corpses, at hand to create puppet-like monsters. But let's talk the big one, Harry himself. How does Harry return when hit with Avada Kedavra in the Deathly Hallows? Well, this is a Category 3 situation. This resurrection was set up with clear intention as far back as Goblet of Fire, when Voldemort takes Harry's blood and by proxy Lily's protection into himself, tethering Harry to life. There's the briefest blink and you miss it line. For a fleeting instant, Harry thought that he saw the gleam of something like triumph in Dumbledore's eyes, and this makes it clear that this isn't some Deus Ex Machina retcon, but was always the intention from the get. It's also worth noting that Harry doesn't break that you can't come back from the world of the dead rule. He never makes it past limbo. If Harry had decided to board a train and go on, he wouldn't have been able to retroactively change his mind. Harry is also master of death here for whatever it's worth. He's master of the Elder Wand, he's always been master of the cloak, and he just used the Resurrection Stone. And most importantly, he chose to greet death as an old friend. Regardless of how well it was established, having Harry return after being defeated by Voldemort in a duel would have felt cheap. But because Harry intended to die, it feels more like rewarding payoff for his daring, nerve, and chivalry. But because blood tethering Harry to life was true in the battle in the graveyard and continued to be true in the final showdown, Voldemort could not kill Harry in either of these two battles either, but JK saved this ace in Harry's sleeve when it was his choice to die, and that, as Albus so eloquently put it, made all the difference. But let's think of some other examples. Gandalf, I'd put him as a Category 2, having a purpose or paradigm shift. Gandalf the White is distinctly separate to Gandalf the Grey in power and purpose and wardrobe choices. Gandalf the Grey died to the Balrog of Morgoth, while Gandalf the White was created to be what Saruman could not. And it's also clearly the exception and not the rule. This is a unique case, even among the already unique subset of wizard characters, and therefore does not diminish any stakes for any other character. Aragorn isn't becoming Aragorn the White anytime soon. Now let's talk about a not so well done example, King John I Don't Want It Snow. Like everything in the last few seasons of Game of Thrones, this felt cheap, poorly written, and underexplored. Let's have a look at the 3 criteria, shall we? Are there any notable drawbacks to his resurrected form? He's a bit moodier maybe, not that he was ever a bundle of laughs, and he feels a bit uncomfortable with the unnatural nature of being stabbed to death then being brought back to life, but he still has all his mental faculties and allies and skill. Does he experience a character or paradigm shift? Well, he doesn't want to be in the Night's Watch, I guess, but that's not because of the resurrection, that's because the members of said Night Watch tried to murder him. For instance, if John had never died from his wounds, the attempt on his life would still have been enough to turn him from his black brothers. It wasn't the dying that changed his attitude, it's the betrayal and risk to his life. And was this set up? Only in the sense that we've seen Beric and Darien resurrected in the past, but Melisandre was really only at the wall by chance, and there's no real reason why John would be resurrected at all. If they lent into the prince who was promised thing even after the fact, it would have worked. John's resurrection would have followed an overarching rule that R'hllor resurrects those key in ending the long night. In this case, it wouldn't be that John's resurrection was set up well, more that his resurrection was the setup. We would be waiting for the payoff. But they kind of just dropped the prince who was promised prophecy, and John spends the long night screaming at a dragon, while Arya, who wasn't even brought back to Winterfell by John like say Dany was, Arya came of her own volition, did all the dirty work. So why did the Lord of Light want John alive? It makes no sense and feels like a cheat. Oh, and if you're going to argue that John needed to be alive to win the Battle of the Bastards, or else Arya would have gone to King's Landing instead of Winterfell to counter, if John's dead, Sansa still wants to reclaim Winterfell, still gets approached by Peter with the support of the Knights of the Vale, and still beats Ramsay, except this time it would have been the plan from the get, meaning that she didn't randomly hide this information for no reason whatsoever other than a dramatic clutch victory at the last second, meaning not wiping a good chunk conquer the wildling army and northern armies, and with a better plan in place, even Rickon would maybe survive. Compare this to, staying in universe here, Lady Catelyn Stark / Stoneheart in the Song of Ice and Fire books. Her resurrected form is described as pretty horrific in the books, communicated in strangled rasps on account of her slipped throats, and you couldn't really mistake her for pre-Red Wedding Catelyn. And moreover, huge character shift. She still follows the Tully spirit of family comes first, so Stoneheart still feels plausibly grounded in Catelyn as a base character, but instead of striving to protect her daughters as Catelyn had, Stoneheart is hell-bent on avenging the Red Wedding. Also, even Catelyn's brashest actions had a lawful underpinning. She kidnapped Tyrion when she suspected him of trying to kill Bran with a sellsword, and takes him to the Eyrie to be tried before being executed. When she frees Jaime, it's under the idea that it would act as a legal exchange of hostages for Sansa and Arya. But after her resurrection, she is no longer beholden to the laws of men. She's judge, jury, and executioner. The Freys are guilty, Brienne and Podrick are guilty, Jaime's guilty, and she intends to hang them all. As to whether the Lord of Light has some big plans for Lady Stoneheart, or Beric Dondarrion for that matter, well, we're gonna have to wait for Winds of Winter, aren't we? Apart from that, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. It lets me know that this is something you want to see more of. One of your favourite examples of resurrection in the media, let me know in the comments or over on Discord, link down below, and I'll see you next week in another video. Bye!